Good morning, everybody. Dobro ranku, I think is the thing, right? Also, I know that you had your Independence Day 2 days ago. Congratulations to that. And moving, that's one of the, yeah. Oh, okay, never mind. That's okay. So, who am I, right? Who's this guy coming from somewhere else and talking to you about WebVR? It's always a bit weird to come somewhere to talk about virtual reality because the whole idea of virtual reality is to not come somewhere, but kind of be wherever you are. So my name is Martin Splitt. I'm head of engineering at a company called Archeologic. And all you see there is what we have been doing so far, and it's in a browser. So that works on your phone and on your computer. And what we do is we have built this editor and presenter kind of thing for architecture in the web. And since then, that is like a bunch of times ago already, since then we have moved on to actually changing our product a little bit to become more of an API kind of package for you, because we want to make creating 3D content and sharing 3D content on the web easier, and VR is part of that. And I'm also a Google developer expert for web technologies, and I work a lot with the Mozilla communities, and I have also contributed a bit to W3C, nothing big, but you know, I'm working with the web standards. That's what I'm trying to do. So when we talk about VR, we have to talk about the market first, I think. I know that as a developer, I'm like, boring. But I think it is important to understand who your users are and what kind of hardware they have. Because the market, as it turns out, is really fragmented. There's a lot of different competing technologies. And they have very different capabilities. So that's by far not all the systems and devices available. That's only some of them. But I think that's like the major ones. So we have the Oculus Rift, we have the HTC Vive, we have the Samsung Gear VR, we have the Google Daydream, and the Google Cardboard. So this entire renaissance of VR has been started by Oculus Rift, because VR is nothing new. Any guesses when the first device that can be considered a VR device was built? Any guesses? Okay, let me do it that way. 1990s, earlier or later? Later? Wrong. What? 80s? Aha, wrong. 1960s. It was called the Damocles sword, and it looked terrible. It looked like a medical appliance. You had like a gigantic stand, and there was like a device hanging from it, and it was like this size, and it looked pretty terrifying. And when the Oculus Rift came about and like cashed in a lot of money on Kickstarter, and then Facebook bought them, that was kind of like re-kicking it off. But you're right, in the 80s there was the Atari thing. There was also in the early 90s there was the Virtual Boy from Nintendo. That was the kind of like the second wave of VR. Now we're in the third wave of VR. And as the English say, third time's a charm, right? So that kicked it off. And so remember, like, you had to buy this device for $500 upwards, depending on where you are in the world. Like I think in Europe it's like $700. And the Cardboard then came around, which was like a Google project that someone did because why not, right? It's like the Google attitude of why not? And they took a cardboard, like literally paper cardboard, and put like some simple plastic lenses in, and then put a phone in. So you can either buy this thing for like $700 or that thing for $5, assuming that you have a phone, which pretty much most of the people do, right? A smartphone, that is. You're not going to have a good time in VR on a Nokia 3310. But that's a different story. And then like everything in the middle happened. And the device capabilities are very different, starting with how you control yourself in VR. So the Oculus Rift gives you 2 controllers, one for each hand, so you can like gesture around with your hands and have a bunch of buttons and touchpads and stuff. The HTC Vive also gives you 2 controllers with touchpads and buttons and stuff for each of the hands. Then we have the Cardboard, which is like on the other end of the spectrum. The first version of the Cardboard had a magnetic button that worked with like one phone or something, I don't know. And all the others had nothing. You could not do much because your phone was in there and you're like, what do I do now? I can only look around, really. Since then they have changed it so you have one button that you can press and it triggers a touch event on the screen, so you can at least do something. You have one button, amazing. With the Gear VR, you have a little touchpad, and now you also have like a controller for it. You can buy that. And the Daydream also has like a controller. It's like a magic wand from Harry Potter, like die and stuff like that. And then we have like the divide between mobile and non-mobile. As I said, it started with the Oculus Rift. That was not a mobile device. You have to hook it up to a computer. It runs a cable, so you can only move around as long as the cable allows you to move around. And then the cardboard, as you put that in your phone, was the first modern mobile VR experience. It's not a terribly great one. It's not the best VR experience ever, and it's certainly not comparable to any of the others. But it did the trick. People liked it. People enjoyed it. And it was kind of like the gateway drug into buying other things for VR. And then came the Gear VR, which was from Samsung. You have to have a Samsung phone that works with it, unfortunately. But that was also mobile. But the mobiles have one downside. The mobile phone does not know where in the room you stand. For the mobile phone, when I start the application, it is the same as I stand here or here, right? Whereas the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift, they have sensors tracking you, or cameras in the case of Oculus. So if I move around in space, they track me. So I can move around in virtual reality by just walking around. That has advantages and disadvantages as well. We're going to see that later. But so basically we have like the room scale, which means it figures out where in the room I am. That is lacking on mobile so far. Let's see when that changes. If that changes, Tango maybe, who knows. We have the mobile capabilities and we have the input capabilities. They are wildly different. That also means that if I build an application for VR, a native application for VR, I have to know what kind of capabilities I need, right? Because if I build an application for the Oculus Rift, that's not going to go well with the with the cardboard. Like, now press B on your controller, and the cardboard person goes, what? So that's not really helping. And it led to a very fragmented market. And then there was a lot of hype. It was super overhyped. But here's like the sales numbers from 2016, just to give you an idea of like how large the market really is or was in the beginning of 2017. We have around 350,000 Oculus Rift devices sold. Okay. We have around 400-something thousand HTC devices sold. Fine. Just for comparison, PlayStation got out a VR thing half a year later or something, and they are selling approximately 700,000, 750,000 units. So that's not that many. I mean, if you consider how many people have a web browser, and then you consider 500,000 people, that's not that much. That's more or less the size of Zurich. So if we look at the world scale, everyone in Zurich or something has a device. So it's not that many. But then came the mobile ones. So Daydream started really relatively late to the game. So we are talking about 2016 sales, and the Daydream came in I think, August. So we're only looking at like quarter a year. So that's like a fourth of the year, but already more or less, let's say 80% of the sales of the Oculus device. Because it's cheaper. The Daydream costs, I think, 80 euros or something. So it's relatively cheap. You need a phone that supports it. That's not as cheap, so we'll see how that goes. And then we have the Gear VR. And that one surprised me, because you have to have a Samsung phone. But apparently Samsung phones are so popular that selling this Gear VR for $100 was not a problem, because they clearly outsold everyone by selling 2.2 million devices. So here you have like 500,000 plus more or less 500,000 is like a million maybe, and then we have like 2.2 million devices on the mobile side. But you know what? There's one player missing. What device are we missing on these slides? A cardboard. And that's because that's the chart after the cardboard sales. So, yeah, right? We are looking at approximately 82 million sold cardboards. There's 82 million cardboards compared to 3, maybe 4 million other devices. So the cardboard is not a great device. I'm not saying it's the best VR device ever. It is really cheap, and you can say that, like you feel that. It's not a good experience, but it is better than nothing. And it's so cheap to try it. So if you're like, I don't know if VR is a thing or not, then probably try the cardboard. The thing is, if you don't like the cardboard, that doesn't mean that VR is shit. It just means that the cardboard is too cheap for your requirements. But a lot of people really enjoy like VR in the cheapest way, and that's perfectly fine. But that means that we have a few people who invested in really high-end VR devices, and we have a lot more people that went for the cheap ones. And we have to somehow bridge that gap. Because the things I can do with the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive, I cannot do with a cardboard. So basically what we have seen is that we have wildly different device capabilities. We have like the high-end VR, and we have low-end VR, we have mobile, non-mobile VR, and it is quite a scattered landscape. Just as is with browsers. I mean, we have people still browsing on an Internet Explorer 8 for security reasons, which is, I heard that excuse, and I'm like, yeah, I gotta go. And I buggered off. And we have pretty much the same situation here. We have very different capabilities, very different devices, and we have to take into account that there's mobile VR, because the market for mobile VR apparently is much larger than desktop VR. Who would have thought? Big surprise, and cardboard is the most deployed. A lot of people, especially when you go to like VR conferences, they're like, yeah, the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive, and we built this amazing stuff where you can like take your two hands and then like, I don't know, create a portal and then just go in, and I'm like, that's cool for the 10 people that have one. But the 82 million are going to be like, right? So that's a bit the situation that you have to keep in mind. A lot of people forget that. And that leads to the second question, like, okay, so VR was like, a few people really loved it, a few people really thought it's stupid, and I think the truth, as usual, is in the middle. I do not think we're gonna be in VR all day tomorrow, or in 100 years probably still not. I don't think VR is gonna replace real reality, or RR as I like to call it, because it sounds piratey, arr, right? ARR, augmented real reality, hilarity. But there is use cases where they make sense. And one of them is, if you think about, I mean, I'm not a 3D modeler or a artist. I'm not very good with drawing. Drawing frustrates me because I have something in my mind, and then I take a pen or a paintbrush or whatever, and I put it on paper, and the moment I put it on paper, it looks shit. So I was like, this is not for me because it frustrates me and I can't be bothered. To be honest, programming is frustrating as well. We all know that. Undefined is not a function. What undefined? Go screw yourself. And what do you mean? No such thing as document query selector. Go away, Internet Explorer. You are drunk. And but you know, I kind of persist with programming. I do not want to persist so much with like drawing and stuff. And then we got an HTC Vive in the office, and I installed Tilt Brush, which is free. And it lets you create things very, very directly. Because if you think about it, a lot of crafts, including programming, is figuring out how to express your thoughts in the real world, or in the world, let's put it that way, using an abstract transmit channel, right? So if we are programming, we have an idea, we know what we want to do, we want an app that does awesome stuff, and then we have to like make that app happen by doing some sorcery or wizardry that is called programming, by basically like boiling down what we've got in our heads into a language that the computer or the phone understands. So it's like an intermediate step, right? It's not a direct thing. It's not like I take my hands and I make boom and then I have an app. It's not a direct thing. So is drawing or painting. You have a picture in your head, and then you have to use this intermediate step of like putting a pen or a paintbrush or whatever onto some medium, paperboard, cardboard, canvas, whatever, and like draw it, and then you have the result. It's not like you do boop, and then there's like a picture right there. But this is pretty much direct, because I get to basically, without having to go into the real world and like touch fire and stuff, I can make a volcano. That's amazing. I can walk around that volcano. I can share that volcano with others. They can experience it so as I do. I can paint with colors. So far, I needed drugs for that, right? So that's pretty cool. So I can create things that I can't create in real world. Because on the real world, I have gravity, and like things get messy, and then like my wife complains that I like ruin the floor, the carpet in the living room. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you putting mud on the living room floor? I'm like, I'm building a volcano, right? She might not like that. So This allows me to do that without making a mess, which is amazing. And you can do really, really cool stuff. And I've seen kids coming into our office from employees, and they just tried it on. And they didn't have to, like, you don't have to go to school to figure that one out, because it was like, hand, hand. Okay, I know those. And button and line. Awesome. And if I do line, it does that as well. And then you can like really start to create something. And that's amazing. And then you have the experience part. So this is oh wow, my computer is running on power save. Hilarity. The GIFs are going to be fun. So this is a building that does not exist. This was dreamt up by an architect, and then created by a colleague of mine, Madeleine Kalunda, as a 3D model. And I can literally stand in there and go like, ooh, there's a pool there, awesome. And because we don't have gravity, you can walk on the water, which is like, ooh, I feel like Jesus now. That's really nice and really fun. So you can like share experiences, you can create experiences, you can express yourself in a way that you can't in real life. And I mean, this is one thing of looking at it, but also think about people. For instance, if you have a wheelchair, you can't necessarily climb up a mountain, because that's pretty tricky, I guess. But you can at least feel as close to being on that mountain as possible, because VR tricks our mind into being there. Our mind goes, yeah, I am on a freaking mountain, awesome. And that's pretty much as good as it gets for some people, and that's perfectly fine. Because it's not going to replace reality, it is creating an emulation that is pretty good. And that's, I think, what matters. And to sum that up, VR gives us, if we do it right, very intuitive interfaces of interacting with content, of interacting with the world. And it gives us a very natural interpretation, because we are three-dimensional beings. I perceive the room in 3 dimensions now, and I can walk there to figure out how far it really is. And it kind of is as far as it looks, and that's nice. But if I take a picture or a video, depending on the angle, the room looks gigantic or it's super tiny. You know that if you have ever searched for an apartment and went on a website and like, oh, oh my God, that apartment, or even hotels, oh, that hotel looks amazing. Like, look how large the beach is. And then you were there, and the beach is basically this. And you're like, I've been fooled. Because a lot depends on how we project things into 2 dimensions, but VR does not have that limitation. It actually gives us a 3-dimensional experience, which is amazing, as the world is 3-dimensional. And last but not least, it allows us to share and collaborate, because when I wanted to create, for instance, let's say a prototype of a car in real world out of wood, then I would have to get people on site. They had to come there, and if I had like the best expert in the world in Australia, I would have to fly them in. Right? They would have to come to my place, and actually we go like, ooh, yeah, this is nice. But now we can kind of get a close approximation of that by basically just using it in VR. And he can do that, or she can do that from Australia. I do it from Zurich, and we have a good time together. But the last bit is actually what resonated with me, because when I read that, I'm like, wait a minute. So we have a very fragmented environment. And the main strength of VR is being able to share and collaborate really quickly on 3-dimensional things, without having to, like, you know, be in the same place or being of the same physical capabilities. But these shared experience and collaboration have a problem. The problem is that the platforms are divided. So the tilt brush drawing that I created, you can't see that on a cardboard. Or I think you can. And maybe now you can, but back in the days when they came out for the HTC Vive, you couldn't. There was no way of sharing it except for making a screenshot, which is kind of stupid because it defeats the point of it being 3D, right? It's like, okay, I have a 3-dimensional thing and you can walk around it and like have fun and watch it explode. My volcano is exploding, awesome. And then I take a picture of that. What's the idea behind that? I want to share the possibility to walk around, and you would have to have an HTC device, and it's sad. And I want a platform that is capable of sharing without creating friction. People should not have a specific piece of hardware. They should not need a specific piece of hardware that is expensive in particular to be able to experience the same thing, or even like modify it and work with it and play around with it. And luckily, we have a platform that does that. Who here has an Android device? Who here has an iOS device? Who here has a Windows phone? A few brave people, awesome. No, that's perfectly fine. The point being, there is people in the audience, if I make an iOS app, they can't use it. They can't do something about it. Who here has a browser on their phone? That's what I thought. It's interesting that a few people don't have a browser on their phone, so probably they're on a Nokia something, which is fine. I mean, they run for 2 weeks without refreshing, that's amazing. But basically, if you have a browser, or who here has a browser anywhere? Right? I mean, come on. Everyone, right? Yeah, there we go. And so the web is the platform that is pretty much everywhere. It's on my TV, unfortunately, because I'm not really into smart TVs because they update. I grew up in the 90s. I turned on the TV, there was program. And MTV was still having music videos, which made sense at the time. So, I know like for millennials, that's like a concept of, what? MTV was playing movies, was playing music on TV? How, why? Anyway, so I had a TV, I turned it on, I had things running. Now I turn on a TV and it updates, and it reboots, and it fails, and it reboots again, and it updates again, and after 10 minutes, I may have something on television. I don't like that, but I have a browser on that television, fine, whatever. I have a browser on probably my fridge soon, who knows? They are pretty much everywhere. So it's a perfect platform to share something with someone really quick because they basically just press on it and then they're in the thing. And the question then is, okay, cool, so we have the web and it's a platform that works on most of the devices and it works for most people. But can it do 3D? Because, you know, I mean, I've seen a lot of websites and none of them really, or a lot of them don't really have anything in 3D. So is that even possible, besides maybe a demo or something? And yes, the answer is yes, it is possible. This is the support graph for WebGL. Just saying, even Internet Explorer has it. So, you know, even that. And the global usage is actually up to 86%, and that's pretty good. And I mean, a lot of people are browsing on Opera Mini, and which is perfectly fine. It's just they disable like pretty much every upper, like more complicated features for saving your battery and bandwidth. So that's fair enough. So we can kind of do that, and this is how the code looks like. Easy, right? No, of course not. Raw WebGL is pretty terrible, actually. First things first, you have to do a bit of setup work over here. Actually, I have a presenter, but I think on a video wall it kind of doesn't work, but let's see if it does. No, of course not. Oh, well, I have to turn it on. That makes sense. It does work, but you can't really see it. So screw it anyway. So here you do some setup work. Here you get like a bunch of points. You put that into video memory. Then you basically compile. Using JavaScript, you compile a program in a different programming language because, hey, why not, right? Client-side compiling sounds fun. Here you do something with memory, like basically you put in the variable, like the values into the variable in the program, and then here you render. And you know what this produces? It's an amazing, complicated, wonderful, beautiful 3D program of a triangle. So all this to get this. I don't know how I feel about that. But luckily, there's abstractions. I'm not saying 3JS is the best abstraction. There's others like Babylon and all that. But 3JS has been around for pretty much the longest from them. So, and the idea is it basically abstracts away all that stuff and lets you make a movie. You have a scene, you have a camera, you have a medium on which the camera renders, which is not film, but actually a canvas element somewhere on your page. And then you have meshes, which are objects that you put on the scene later, and then you film, basically. So this is like filming, this is the actual filming. Here we create a box like every 3D object is called a mesh in 3JS. You put that box onto the scene, and here's like some setup work to get a camera and a renderer and an empty scene. With that, it makes it a lot easier to build stuff, but we still haven't answered the question of VR. And conveniently, there is VR available. It's called WebVR. It's a new standards proposal. It's not a standard yet. They're working on it, and I help them with it as well. And I do invite you all to go to webvr.info and like check it out and actually contribute, because it is available on pretty much many platforms and devices. It works with all the devices that we've seen except for PlayStation VR. Fair enough. But pretty much everything else works in it. And what it gives you is that slide was weird. I think the slide was misplaced. Anyway. What it gives you is it gives you the possibility to detect any headset. So you can figure out, wait a minute, am I on a phone? Ooh, in that case, I maybe have a cardboard. Am I on a computer that has an HTC or an Oculus Rift attached to it? Ooh, nice, and I can use that. So it gives you that. it also gives you the orientation, which is where is the user looking at, and where is the user in space, if that is available. On a cardboard, it doesn't give you the position because it doesn't know, but you can get that information. And also, it extends the web gamepad APIs to allow you to actually access these like controllers, because they have position in 3D space as well. So that's pretty cool. So we get all the information that we need from WebVR, but we still see a lot of red. And that's because it is a proposal. It's an experimental standard. And actually on Chrome, there's like these little flags that you can enable, and it's kind of nice. Actually, they use like a different protocol called Origin Trial, so you register your website with their system, and then the browsers actually understand it. And then we have some surprises. And I think the biggest surprise is this. But okay, I mean, when I saw that, I was surprised. And so yeah, I mean, we have Firefox 55 shipped a few days ago or a few weeks ago. I mean, I don't know in what time zone I live right now. I might live on Mars when it comes to times and dates. So basically, like, Firefox has it in stable now, no flags, no magic, no nightly build. It's just the Firefox. You have it in Edge, you have it in Chrome for Android. That's over here. Da, 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 ding. And you have polyfills as well. So you can polyfill this, which is nice to a certain degree. So basically, we have it available on Chrome for Android. There's a Chromium build if you want to play around with like it on Windows or macOS or Linux. We have Firefox Nightly. We have Edge. This is Samsung Internet. It supports it as well. And this is Carmel, which is an experimental browser from Facebook for the Oculus Rift. And we have it for Servo, which is the experimental rendering engine for Firefox in the future, maybe, possibly, hopefully. It is an open standard, so you can go on the GitHub repository, read all about it, and go like, I don't understand this, or I don't like how this is done. As a developer, I don't know how to use this. All that kind of feedback is valuable because it helps us create a web standard that makes sense for you, right? That's an important thing. There's lots of tooling in the strong community. So basically, when you have any questions, you go to the mailing list, or you go to Twitter, or to webvr.info, or to the WebVR Slack, and everyone's happy to help you. And also, it makes it much, much easier to create and share, because so far, what you've done is, for instance, when you use Unity, you write code, you press build, it builds, it transfers it to the headset, you put on the headset, you go, oh, this is shit. You reprogram, you rebuild, you retake the headset. Now I can basically have my browser open and like do it in the browser. And there's even a Chrome DevTools extension that allows you to basically try out how it's going to look like on the headset. So that's really cool and easy to work with. And actually, I wanted to show you how that works, but it's going to be a bit tricky because it's like, but I'm going to do it anyways. Because, you know, I like pain. All right, let me sit down. So here we have a very exciting, interesting, super cool website. Oops, no, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make that full screen. And the source code for this website is as exciting as you would expect. However, it has this A scene here, and it loads a script called A-frame. And that's a Mozilla library that allows me to do this. A box, color, let's say red, and I position it somewhere so that we can see it. Position equals 0, 0, -5, for instance, and then I close this one. And now I reload my page, and there's this. It's a bit weird that it's like slightly to the bottom, and that is because the camera emulates a human being of 1.60 m height. So I'll move it 1.60 m up, like this. And okay, now it's with us. Nice, very great. But you know, that's a bit boring, and there's like nothing behind it. So I can say I want a sky of a certain color as well, and I'll make it a terrible color so that you all get like eye cancer because I like you so much. No, I'm just kidding. I just can't remember like color codes. Okay, wow, ooh, this is pretty terrible. But if I would be on a device that supports WebVR, it would also have like this button here puts it into full screen. Amazing, amazing. But if I would have a device that is VR, it would also allow it to actually go to VR now. But now comes the real power, and I have to lay down this thing here. because I have to press a bunch of keys, and I can't do that with one hand because I don't have 10 fingers or something on one hand. 1 second. Luckily, I'm German, so I can shout. Right. So I press the magical key combination, and what I get is these dev tools, and they're quite nice because I can see. I should probably zoom in a bit. I can actually see my scene graph here. So here's my box. Here's my sky. They inserted automatically for me a camera and 2 lights. But if I go to my sky, for instance, and then I go over here, new things have popped up. So now if I basically go back to normal, and you see that basically now when I click on an object, I can also click on this one actually, I get the possibility to like move things around. So I can move the box closer to the camera, for instance. And when I then say go back to scene, it is closer, and it's a bit weird as well. I can also like rotate it. So I can say I want to rotate this, I don't know, 45 degrees or something. There we go. So I get to basically change every property I want. I can scale it as well. I can make it like this. And here we go, looking weird. Let's remove that again. All right. And I can change everything about it around here. And for instance, for the sky, if I don't like the sky, I can go here and I say, okay, blue is a bit weird, so let's have like a nicer sky color like this, right? And this is how you can build your application. You can export this into HTML and then just go forward with it. So this is kind of neat. This is kind of fun, and all, and yeah, yada yada. And I can also change the box to something else. So here. That's not the box. I pressed on something. Is it a box? What the hell? Where's the geometry? I might have missed it somewhere. Ah, yeah, here we go. So I can make that into a sphere, for instance. Now that's going to look weird because I scaled it and it's not quite correctly scaled anymore, but I can then go up. No, I can't go up. Okay, here we go. Fix the scale so that it is a round, nice sphere again. I can go to the material. I can say I don't want this to be a regular material. I want to go like full 90s. On the cab ride here, when we were in the taxi, we had like super awesome 90s music. So here we go. And I can do all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of boring to just have like a bunch of shapes. So how about we make something more interesting? So where's my mouse cursor? Here. Okay, there we go. What I can also do is, I don't like a single color. So what I do is I say I want to load an image. And this is like a spherical image. You can do that with cameras and your phone and stuff. And I call this, which one do we need? I go with summit2.jpg. And if I now reload, let's reload. It loads the image. And now we're standing on top of a mountain. That's nice. It's also a bit weird, isn't it? Let's actually just use like sky, which is a more generic one. We're going to see that in a second. And I might also actually want to load something that also looks nice. And here they are not called meshes, here they are called entities. And I can say I want to load. So GLTF is a file format. Think of it as JPEG for 3D, if you want. So I want to load a GLTF model, and I'm never sure about the syntax, but I think it's like this. Model slash, no? What's the model file called? Because I can't remember, but I think it's called export GLTF. Export GLTF. And if I did everything right, yeah, there we go. So I loaded a 3D model, and I loaded the 3D model that I told you earlier about. Like this is this house that has never been actually created. So now we have like our virtual reality house, and you can get these models from us, for instance, or from the internet. It doesn't really matter where you get them from. And now comes a nice one. Don't fall down. Jesus Christ, this thing is rolly. There we go. So we have it in the inspector as well. So I didn't do anything special or magical, and I still have the ability to like move it around. If I want to move it like there, for instance, or if I want to move it up a bit. So I get to like try everything I want, and I get a different view, as you can see. I have moved, apparently. And this is quite cool. And then you can combine that with like other components as well. So I'm quickly gonna copy this and paste it in. Ah, my OCD is kicking in. All right, here we go. I'll close this folder because I can't remember the, okay, it's called A-frame-extras. And then I can get, like, for instance, an ocean, because this is part of this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing here. And I can say I want an ocean, and I want it to be, let's say, 500 meters wide, and it's called depth, but it's actually not depth. It's basically like how far does it stretch towards the horizon. It's not like 500 meters deep ocean or something like that. It's not like that, no. And if I now reload again, then we have a bit of global warming. So I probably want to reposition this one here a bit. Position equals something, something. And then we go like maybe a meter up. And yes, that's what's going to happen if we don't get our shit together. Yeah, that looks better. And then we have like the ocean around us, and you can see like the waves here, and I can configure like the color and all that kind of stuff. So that's absolutely a possibility that we can do. We also, if you don't know where to find like 3D models or cool APIs, then we have this new thing that has started a few weeks ago, which is called 3D.io, and we provide you with a bunch of APIs and things that you can start with. And one of the more powerful concepts is if you want to try out something, you can try out our app creator, for instance. It's free. It doesn't cost you a buck. And it gives you the possibility to also like do it here. And the best thing is when you create something here, you also get it hosted for free. So if I click here, I get just the application. So you don't even have to worry about hosting. But another thing that is quite powerful and quite cool, and I have to find the freaking release because I don't know where that is. Oh God, releases. We have to improve on our website, I think. Actually, I think it's in the documentation, distribution. Ah, there we go. And then I load this thing. Oh, I load this one from the internet. That's going to be fine. Yay. Let's see how that's going. So if I load this from the interwebs, oopsa. Come on. Script. Nope. Script. Source. Why does it do that? It hates me right now. It's okay. It's fine. I'll live. There we go. And then I can do things like a entity, tt, position. This takes too long with one hand, but basically what I can do is, and we have an app for that as well, because you know you have to have an app for that. It's furniture.3d.io. So if I want furniture, for instance, for my experiments or something, then I can go to furniture and I can search, for instance, for a shelf. And it's going to go to the internet, and it's loading the shelves. This is a weird shelf. This is not a shelf. Are you crazy? All right, this is apparently a shelf. It gives you a preview of the shelf, and it gives you some source code that you can happily steal. And you see, like, I just go like IO3D furniture, and I give it an ID. It has an ID in our system. And I can also like just click on open in CodePen, and then it creates me a new CodePen if the internet plays with me. Yeah, there we go. Da, 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 da. And then you have the code right there, and you can start experimenting. So this is the kind of stuff, this is our mission, making this easier for you. And I think A-Frame is a great tool for that, because A-Frame really facilitates experimentation in the browser. You've seen the developer tools, they are pretty amazing. Right. Goes without saying that not everything is like blue sky and fun. There is a few challenges. And one of the biggest challenges is how do you do input? So hence, maybe not. There's other ways of doing that. So for instance, what you can do is, hands also have a problem that not everyone has the device. So if I'm on a cardboard, right, I don't have my hand inputs. What you can do is you start with a very simple interaction, which is if I stare at an object for a while, you can show a little countdown, and if that one like fills up, if the countdown expires, you interact with it. It's like, oh, I want to select that. Click, right? That's the easiest and like lowest level interaction that you can have, and then you can extend. You can say, okay, but if I have a pointer device, I can also point at it and click at it. it doesn't like exclude one thing from the other. And you can even like go like, I have two hands now, I can go there and grab it. You can do all sorts of things, starting by enhancing from this simple interaction. Just a few ideas. So gaze is the thing that we just saw, like you just stare at something for a while. You might use the gamepad and VR controllers. You might use the leap motion, that's the hands thing, if it makes sense. Don't do it for a chess game, as we've seen. You can use a Mayo, which is like an armband that you can kind of like figure out when you press things and like move your arms, and you can even have two of them, which is like super fun. You can use things like Kinect and RealSense to actually figure out position and pose for cardboards if you want to do that. There's experiments that done that. Also, another challenge is how do you move around? So this is one suggestion. That's kind of like the ninja way of doing it. So you basically pull like this little ball, and then you go, okay, I want to go over there. So you throw a thing over there, and then you go with another ball, like poof, ninja style. That's very fun and nice, but that's not solving the actual problem. And the problem really is, so my living room might have like this size, for instance, right? That's the area that I can walk in. And then I go into a virtual recreation of this conference, and I want to go back there. How do I go? Like, I physically can't walk that far. So I'm like, So we have to find ways of doing that. There's a few better experiences than that. So you can also point somewhere and then like teleports you there. That's another possibility. But that's a challenge that we have to work on. The other thing is presence. So you are technically a floating pair of eyeballs, right? No system tracks your entire body. So the thing is, how do you create experiences like that? You don't know where the person's looking at. You don't know the hand motions. This is a cardboard. You have no idea if the person's like doing this. So what you can do is you can basically judge from the situation. So here, for instance, what they're doing is when you turn, they assume that your eyes go with you. So basically they just pretend, okay, this person is turning that way, so we are moving these googly eyes in that direction. So it's like, it's fake, but you can't tell. It looks good, doesn't it? The same with the hands. They're like, okay, the person is looking in the direction of the thing, and the thing is coming closer to its goal. Like, this is the goal, right? The collision has to happen. So we are getting closer, it's getting better, so the user might actually encourage this to happen. It's all fake, but it creates a sense of this being real, right? Just by making sure that you understand what the anticipation is and what the behavior. There's a lot of psychology in this one, but it makes such a big difference. Imagine they're just being like the cardboard with no googly eyes and no hands. The scene would look very, very different. And one last thing before I get off the stage, as I get urged as well. Steve Jobs once said, the computer is a great tool because it's basically the bicycle of our minds. And he means that the bicycle extended our physical capabilities. With the bicycle, we can go much faster than we can go with like just our legs. Yet we don't have like the overweight of having like a car or a plane or something around us. And I think VR is the teleporter for our minds. Because it really makes our minds believe that we are somewhere where we are not and maybe cannot never go, right? So this is really cool, and this is why I really like VR, and I encourage you to try it out and play around with it yourself. Thank you very much. Ďakujem.